Kisha. Oh, and we're recording. And Dr. Shamaine Bertrand, thank you for coming. So we're gonna have it, as you can see, we have pizza. So we're gonna have pizza, I think, every week, right? Is that the game plan? So even if the speaker is virtual? No? Can we not do that? That seems reasonable, no? I mean, if people are in the building, who cares if the, I don't know, I'm asking in general.
I mean, if you have pizza every week, I'm eating pizza.
I think that if we want to get people back in the building and chatting, then, and I think we have the funds. I mean, I'm looking at you because of GSEC, but I don't actually know if you know if we have the funds.
I don't know.
Maybe
I think
we do, we good. Okay, so great. So we will have pizza and us in here every week, but the speaker may or may not be physically present. But if they're not physically present, we'll just project them and do it that way. I think that'll work. So come, we will preview the next speaker at the end of each presentation so that you know who else is coming with a fantastic lineup. We really, really do. And we're looking very much forward to doing that. You know that we're being recorded. Is that clear?
We're cute.
And yes, I know, that's not the, yeah. Don't worry about that. And that's it. I'm handing it over.
Hi, everyone. I don't know if you all can see me. I'm Brittany. I'm a fourth year PhD candidate here at Rutgers. I'm really excited to introduce some of my really good friends. The story's for another day, how we became friends. But these two beautiful, wonderful women met each other at George Mason University, where they got their PhDs. They are both tenure track professors in education. One is Dr. Shamaine is at College of New Jersey, and Dr. Kisha is at Delaware, University of Delaware, even though she should be here, but that's something else anyway. So I'm so excited for you all to hear them. And if you haven't listened to the podcast, it's amazing. Yes. And I was a guest on the podcast. So definitely check it out. The first season I was a guest. But anyway, so without further ado, two amazing people, Dr. Porcher and Dr. Bertrand.
First of all, let me just set this.
Like,
what bothering me? We're gonna look at this laptop too, y'all. So good morning, everyone. I'm super excited to be back at the GSC to hang out with y'all. This was my first home, and now I'm at UD. But I've done some different things since I left Rutgers and kind of shifted my research, and so I'm super excited to be doing this alongside my homie, my best friend. If you don't listen to our podcast, shame on you. But we are gonna, no, I hope y'all ready to laugh because we are not that serious, okay? So relaxing, we definitely have opportunities for you all to ask us some questions, but today we're gonna talk about how we came to our podcast and how we're thinking about the work that we've done in our podcast as a framework around the Black gaze. So we'll talk about that today. And we just want y'all to sit back and engage with us. Like, we are not just here to talk to you all, but we want to be in conversation with you all. So the name of our talk is Black Gaze Framework, Centering Blackness in Teacher Ed. What a tech person at shame.
It was working. I think you got to be in proximity.
What? This is some madness.
You're gonna have to use their own.
All right. So just like, what's up, Kevin? Just like great teachers, we gotta have an agenda for you all. I know sometimes these things can become super methodical, but we're educators, and so we're gonna tell you all where we're going and make sure we're good. So we're gonna start off honoring the OGs, and if you don't know what an OG is, just talk to somebody next to you, they'll help you. And then we're gonna have an opportunity for you to lean back and to join the conversation and really start to examine anti-Blackness in teacher education. We're going to give you an opportunity to freedom dream too. Like, in what ways can we center Blackness in teacher ed? We're going to talk about how we went from the Black Gaze podcast to now the Black Gaze framework. We're going to talk about the podcast, take you through the framework, and even give you the opportunity to kind of think about how you might be able to implement the elements in your own classroom spaces. we're gonna give you an opportunity to lean back like Fat Joe again and kind of think about how we can center Blackness going forward. If you didn't have a chance to watch the end, we added this to our presentation lately because if you understand whiteness, whiteness will always center itself. And so we're gonna have a conversation about that, have questions, and then we out. That's still me?
Yeah, but I need you to log into this laptop so I know what slide is what.
Oh my goodness. Oh my gosh. Okay, so if you listen to our podcast or you've seen us talk anywhere we go, we always start off by honoring the OGs. Kevin or Brittany, can you tell everybody what an OG is?
Original gangster.
An original gangster.
Thank
An original
you.
gangster, but can you give them more context about why we might be using it in this way?
I don't know, usually it's people we love who like started things for us.
People we love that paved the way. And so it's not just like this in the Black community, but we're going to talk from the Black perspective. We always think about the people who came before us, who paved the way and gave us the opportunity to be here today. And so we're going to talk about our OGs that kind of took us to a place and made us start to think about centering Blackness. So I am a graduate of the best institution in the world. I don't care if I'm here, Spelman College. And when I was at Spelman, it's a historically Black college, I met this amazing woman named Dr. Gwendolyn Middlebrooks. She was a part of the civil rights movement, literally broke her leg jumping out of the window of a protest. So she was the first person to really introduce me to Blackness, our beauty, our struggle, our greatness. But why it was so important to think about centering Blackness in educational spaces. She was 77 when she was teaching my class. She ran 3 miles every day, coached her granddaughter's volleyball team, and went swimming. And she would always say, I can't stand when people scooting their feet around. You know, you're on the earth, you got, you know, breath in your body. You need to be moving like you have purpose. And I used to be like, but it's 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm tired. But she really made me think about like who I am as a Black person and all of the great people that came before me and how it was a privilege for me to be in that space. So today I want to honor Dr. Gwendolyn Middlebrooks.
And my OG is Hazel Sumner, which is my Nana, my grandma. It was my grandmother who pretty much raised me when I was younger. And in that space, we grew up in a place called Lumberton, North Carolina. If you don't know nothing about Lumberton, North Carolina, we get down there. You know about that? Yes, yes. But
Going on in Lumberton.
they ain't nothing going on in Cincinnati, but whatever. So anyway, before we deal with that hatred, my grandmother to me introduced me to being a Black woman. She was a model for me, a role model. She was the first at that time in our family who had a college degree. So it was as if she was navigating this path, being a trailblazer so that I could be here today before you all. And so that's my OG. And I'm thankful that she introduced me into just being Black and loving being Black.
We got 2 laptops, so you got to help me out. All right, so anybody know the Fat Joe song?
Yeah.
Lean back. Yeah. All right, so we know you know. Anybody else know the Fat Joe song? Lean?
Brittany is our amen queen.
Okay, I need y'all to look that up. And this is the dance. So like when you know, you can hit the lean back if you want to. But we want to invite you all into the conversation before we get started. So I want you to think about a course that you're teaching or that you're taking. How many Black authors or texts, widely defined? So when you think about text, it can be actual articles, podcasts, film, video, are included on your syllabus. If they are present, are they the central text or the marginal ones? Take a few moments to think about that. And don't worry, I ain't gonna tell your business. I just want you to be true. Give you a few more moments to think. Anybody want to share? What you got? Brittany, I ain't gonna follow you. Anybody want to share? This is an easy answer. I mean, it's a hard one because you know, I've got to think about these things, but. No.
I would say the vast majority, I don't say the majority, but maybe like 1/3, somewhere around 1/3, maybe closer to half of my text is Black author.
Okay. Anybody else? What's up, Drew?
Yeah, so I'm teaching a seminar on assessment and delivery.
Mhm.
The last time I taught it was 18, and And so this time around, and traditional assessments very much,
Right?
But I've had a few weeks at least, and permeated throughout, really trying to channel issues of equity, fairness. In fact, we wrote a couple of papers on differences between social justice and psychometric views and fairness.
Right, I knew you was gonna say Rodney or Stafford Hood, because when you started saying evaluation, I'm like, okay, who are those black people?
Yeah, so it's in the volume of data. So anyway, trying to work that.
Anybody else want to share? What's up, Ruby?
So in the methods course over the past couple of years, I've tried to shift it so that we have a greater representation of Black BIPOC authors in general. The book, the only book that we're reading is Dr. Bettina Love's book, so that is fairly central in there. I mean, the other stuff that read the framework and all that, that's just the generic standards. There are some other authors that read very much Billings, and, but also there are videos that we have. So one part of it, instead of reading, so always like reading out, is we have videos, and those videos are much more representative. Issues about
The reason why we wanted you all to take some time to think about that, I think the last time I was at NCTE in person in 2019, and I went to almost like a seminar of Black authors, and they talked about how there's such a fight for their text to be included in the courses that we teach. And they said normally where they see it happen is like, okay, there's a white central text, but then our text is on the side. And so it's hard for them to argue and say like, no, my work can be central and we can actually learn from that. And so it's been something I've been thinking about, like, okay, in what ways am I actually centering them as opposed to saying like, no, this is the standard knowledge and we have to learn from this first and then go to that. And so I want to give you an opportunity to freedom dream a little bit, because what we're asking you to do might make you a little bit uncomfortable, because sometimes when we're teaching, we do things that we had other professors do or other educators do, and we just kind of keep on with what they're doing, but we have an opportunity to do it better, right? And so actually, I want to give you an opportunity to turn and talk to other people if you feel comfortable, but if you don't, you can just turn and learn and listen to somebody who really wants to talk. So you can choose one of these. Are you free? How do you know? Do you believe that everyone in this country is free? If so, how do you know? What does it mean for Black people to be free? So you can choose one of the three and talk to someone next to you. We'll give you 2 minutes to do that. Are you free? How do you know? Do you believe that everyone in this country is free? If so, how do you know? What does it mean for Black people to be free? Oh boy. Now I'm actually talking. You got free.
I got 10 minutes to decide if I'm free. Trying to get a mortgage. That really is. terms of like material. Territory. And then the culture that was stolen from yeah, I don't think it's limited.
All right, can we have everybody back? Man, we were having some critical conversations in this. Can we have everybody back? I'm doing my teacher thing, sorry. I heard some really critical conversations over here, but I'm not gonna ask you all to share, but can I have just one group tell me what question you all talked about and how you kind of toiled over it? Kevin. Your group.
Kevin was chilling.
Yeah, so then, Dr. Clark and I talked about a couple of things. One of the things we mentioned is, you know, the part of freedom is being free to be your authentic self as a Black person without fear of reprisal. I think you probably think a lot about personal context. Like what it means to be free to, you know, just sort of be Black in the way you understand what Blackness is. The other thing I was thinking about is much more like in terms of what is materially owed to Black folks has been stolen. And I'm thinking in a sort of international diasporic sense, colonized lands in Africa, some of the cultural artifacts, some of the histories and the languages that have been pillaged through history of colonization on the continent. For those things to be rectified would mean freedom. Right? That freedom is sort of tied up in the sort of restitution of all of those things that have been taken from Black folks in the diaspora.
Wow. Okay, we can do this conversation all day, but we know we can't be before y'all long, so we're gonna push through. So go ahead, friend.
So y'all might be thinking, or y'all might not be thinking, but we're gonna tell you anyway, how we came to this space of not only Black gays, but how we came to this space of focusing and centering Blackness. And it was 2019. You would think that Dr. P and I have been together forever, but we haven't. It was 2019, June. We went to a fellowship. We got into a fellowship called the Institute of Teachers of Color. If you all have never heard of it, it is pretty amazing. It is. We went to the University of California, Riverside, hence the UCR photo that you see in the picture. And we were sitting amongst teachers and faculty of color throughout the country. And the facilitator had posed a question, and they said, what would it look like to decenter whiteness and to center ourselves? And I was like, dang. And I think I looked over at Dr. P and she was like, dang. And we were just blown away because nobody has ever posed such a question to us. And so we started to have a conversation. Well, if we decenter whiteness, then that means we have to center something. And so what would that something be? And so we began to talk about, well, we'll center Blackness, we'll center ourselves. And so what would that look like? And so we spent time having this conversation about, well, dang, nobody's ever given us the freedom, or we've never taken the liberty to begin to have a conversation around centering Blackness and what that would look like. So we started to think like, what can we do? How can we do this? And podcasting actually came into our conversation. So we driving over to the Santa Monica Pier. We like, yeah, we gonna do a podcast. We ain't have no name. We just talking about it's gonna just be about Black people and Blackness and just blackly black, right? And
Just
so
like that.
And we did. We hype ourselves up. We don't need no crowd. And so we get there and we're thinking about it, and we left the fellowship. We get home and we're still talking about this podcast, but it wasn't until November when we actually went to the National Association of Multicultural Education. It was in Tucson, Arizona. And we're sitting at the table, and I think it was Django Paris that was talking. And he started talking about Toni Morrison's work, or what does it look like to step outside of the white gaze?
Mhm.
And immediately it was like, boom, Black Gaze. That's the name of this podcast. That's the name of what we're gonna dedicate ourselves to. And so from there, we started to move in this space of, we are now going to have the Black gaze and center Blackness in everything that we do. If it's not about being Black, then we don't want it.
Period, boo.
Like my daughter would say.
All right, so I just want to show this video real quick before we get started. 'Cause
I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm blacker than black, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all.
That's the most ratchet thing.
Okay, I gotta get that. All right.
Get back.
All right, pause. All right, so I think it's important for us to talk about how we're defining Blackness.
Mhm.
And I did tell you I went to Spelman College at the beginning, and it's a very elitist type place, right? And so, especially when you move from a space where you didn't have and now you have, as Black people, we can get stuck in saying that, okay, we want to be different, but in our ways of being different, it's trying to be more white, right? And so it was important for us to be intentional about how we defined Blackness. And so it's not just the people who have PhDs, it's the people in the projects too. So everybody has to be able to go. And so we leaned on the work of Dr. Lamar Johnson, Goldie Muhammad, Dumas and Ross, and they talk about the complexity of Blackness, right? And so not just the people who show up real respectable, but
I'm so sorry.
They can
Can
see this?
people on Zoom can't see your presentation?
I don't know what's going on.
Share your screen.
Yes,
Again?
I'm gonna not have her touch it no more.
Shame on you.
Hold on. Wait, people.
See?
Share screen, and then we're gonna do that, right?
Yeah.
And then I gotta find it.
Can they see it
Can
now?
they see it now?
Yes.
Tell them they're gonna have to call, they gotta pay me for my time. All right, so.
You messed it up. Keep going.
So it's an embodied experience thinking about Black culture. It's not just the things that make us feel comfortable, but I think it's important for us to understand that Blackness is not monolithic, but it is multifaceted. So when we look at Blackness, we're looking at the joy, the struggle, the hope, the love, the pain, and the light, right? And so loving Blackness in general, as Bill Hook says, is something that's revolutionary. And so in our work, we had to really step back and say, why, when we think about Blackness in this way, we cringe? What about that makes us uncomfortable, right? Are we then centering whiteness if we only want this definition or this type of Black person to be included? So we've been doing that work amongst ourselves too.
And when you do this,
I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all.
so okay, moving forward. So when you do this work, y'all can tell who the serious one is, right? Right? So when you do this work, one of the things that you need, and what Dr. P and I have found, is that you need somebody to lean on, because you're going against the grain when you start to decenter whiteness and begin to start centering Blackness. And so what we found is, as we started our podcast, we created this space that was just, to us, a pure space. It was a space where we finally felt like we were liberated when we got on those microphones. We found healing. We found joy. Y'all hear us snotting and crying on one podcast and then laughing on the other one, then consoling each other. Like, it was just this movement. And as we were listening to people who listen to the podcast, they'll be like, I felt like I'm in the living room with my sisters. I feel like I'm talking to, my best friend or something of that nature. And so we began to think, wait a minute, we have created what Bell Hooks talks about, this home place, this place of resisting whiteness and oppression, but this place of joy and peace, where as Black women, we felt protected within this space. And it was created by us. I ain't trying to be like FUBU, but it was created by us and for us, right? So that's one of the things that we pull from this work, is Black gaze as a home place.
I ain't gonna mess this thing up.
You're gonna use the arrow.
I'm using the area. So we came up with our mission statement, and y'all see us, we cute. We did a whole photo shoot and everything. Y'all see our shirt. All right. 2 women in academia, raising questions and breaking down perceptions from a Black point of view. And so on our podcast in general, we are asking questions about the ways in which we show up in the world, the ways in which we engage with other Black people, the ways in which Black people engage with other Black people. So we interview people who didn't have the same experiences as us, as a learning opportunity for us too. And they challenged us on the things that we were doing well. And so I think the raising questions, I think, is extremely important. Not saying that we have all of the answers, but if we ask the right questions, we'll get there.
And one of the things that's so interesting is, we told you all the foundation of how we came to this space of creating the podcast. But when we got that idea for Black Gays in November, we were still scared to launch it. And so the pandemic hit, we sitting at home, not knowing if the world ended or what's happening, all these plagues. And so the next thing you know is we are like, well, and it was actually Dr. P's husband, like, y'all might as well just, release something. And so we're like, So we had to set goals for ourselves. We was like, if we just get 25 people to listen to this podcast, girl, we doing this thing. So we done put the podcast out there in the universe and people actually were listening. And so at this point, look, I'm like, people actually were listening to us. So at this point, we have the numbers here. We've completed 3 seasons. We finished our last, not our final season, but our latest season was season 3, which ended in the summer. We have a nice presence on social media. And if you're not following it, make it nicer so that you can follow us along. We have an average listenership of 500 people per episode with 49 different countries. It was amazing that we have people in the continent of Asia to the continent of Africa listening to Black Gays podcast. So that was pretty amazing. And on top of that, one of the things that we also wanted to do is we understand that we are tenure track faculty. We do not know all things. So we wanted to bring some of the OGs into our presence. And so we created a space called Conversations with the OGs. And that was our live event. You can go on YouTube and see it. But we had people like Dr. Yolanda Seeley Ruiz, Dr. April Baker Bell, Dr. Christopher Emden, Dr. Goldie Muhammad, Dr. Bettina Shea, and former Mr. David Johns, who is now Dr. David Johns. So we've had even emerging OGs as well that we don't have on here because the PowerPoint ain't got enough space. But we've had so many people to come and show us love and give us knowledge on what it means to be Black in academia.
I was on it too.
You got her loud and direct.
We are not gonna get through this presentation. Okay, so the one thing that we really thought about was like, how can we make the Black Gays podcast a form of research? And when we think about the ways in which we do research, it's very light. Like, and I'm sorry, ain't nobody really reading those articles. I'll just be honest, And so I need to be quiet. Okay, so I'm gonna be serious. So what we found was like other scholars started using our podcast in their classes as a teaching tool. Other teachers started using our podcast as a teaching tool. Like, my students are actually taking to this more than the article that you have out about this. So we're using this. And so I wanted to like boast a little bit and share some of the stuff that people said. So one of, actually, she just graduated with her doctorate and she talked about how she used our podcast in her dissertation. She said, welcome back. I've truly missed you ladies. This is my self-care, another episode that blessed me as a doctoral student. I don't have time to read everything I want to, but thanks to you ladies, I have a running list. I appreciate the transparency and the way y'all recognize, uplift, and shout us out. Thank you, ladies. But this one was super important. And this was actually by a non-melanated person. My first listen to this podcast is We've Been Knowing. It's an amazing episode. I love hearing the important perspective of 2 Black women in the academy. 2 Black women doing the important work of teacher education. Their interpretation of the February 6th event through the lens of their experience is an important perspective for any American to listen to in order to understand how this crisis fits into the American history of racism. I'll be listening to more episodes for sure. So even though it's an episode that centers Blackness, y'all can learn from it too if you're not Black.
The podcast actually led us to a space where, we in academia, the things that academia makes you do, honey. So we decided that we need to take this podcast and this framework that we have within this and make it applicable to what we're doing in teacher education. And so now we're going to do a little shift on you. So we actually researched, okay, what are some of the frameworks that we already use that center Blackness? How are we using them within this space? And we noticed that yes, we have critical race theory, which is usually our #1 go-to, and we are thankful for the work of Lasson, Billings, and Tate, who actually made that applicable within an educational space and context. We looked at Dumas and Ross and Black Crit, and we saw how that centers Blackness and gives an understanding of Blackness. We actually also looked at Black story work, which Justin Coles has written beautiful pieces on how Blackness allows you to tell stories within. But one of the things that we noticed is we use all of these different frameworks, but for us, we need to know how these frameworks helped us to disrupt anti-Blackness and put it in action. And so that's what we've really been focusing on as we share with you our Black Gays framework.
So here My husband did this, y'all. We don't pay him because, listen,
We don't have no money.
we ain't got no money. So this is our image for our framework, and we do have an article that is under review. But we want to go through the different tenets of the Black Gaze framework. So we took what we did on the podcast and started to think about, how can we make this a framework? And we actually started with the one with you all today, honoring our OGs. So even in our framework, we start off and think through who are the Black theorists who have really paved the way for us in teacher education. Most of the time, we talk a lot about Vygotsky and Erickson and Piaget, but I'm like, no, who are the Black people that really helped us understand Black education in a different way? And so we had an opportunity to lean onto their history and wisdom to think about how we can better teach our courses, but also engage with other people. But the ways in which we also push back on this idea of who gets to define what a theorist is. Right? So my grandmother is an OG, right? And so she might be a theorist to me, right? And I've looked at the work of Justin Coles just because we talked about him, and he talks about how Beyonce and Kendrick can be considered theorists and people that we can learn from. So even pushing back on who gets to define what a theorist is, especially in the Black community, and how can we invite that history and that wisdom into the classroom space. And so we want to give you an opportunity to kind of put your swag on it. Do y'all know swag and fashion? All right. So we want you all to take a few moments to kind of think about who might be some Black theorists, and think beyond the OGs that we know, like Gloria Laxton-Dillons and other people. Who could be some OGs that we can invite into our classroom spaces that can teach us a little bit more about teacher education? I want you to take a few moments to think about that. Might be hard, but you got it. You got it, girl. You got it. Oh, don't threaten me with a good time. Stop. Okay. I don't want to. All right. Anybody can think of someone you might invite into the teacher education?
So
What's up?
I would say just this thought came to me. And this is a long time individual. And this is a barber.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. They up and they
First
got
name Justice.
justice. Barbers have all the teeth and hairstylists.
And wisdom.
And wisdom too. They help a lot of people. I actually asked my hairstylist, like, how do you hold so many people's stuff? He was like, I know, I need a therapist. But anybody else want to take a stab at it? Who might be an OG that you would invite into the teacher education space that you feel like we can learn more about centering Blackness? Nobody?
Are you referring to more unofficially from the academy?
They can be unofficial or official.
I took a great deal of learning from a gentleman named Sean Harper, who used to be at the University of Pennsylvania. He's now in
USC.
California.
Yes.
Mhm.
He's an outstanding professor and speaker on race and equity. He was a big part of the theory that I put in my dissertation. He's a fascinating guy.
Yes, love Sean.
I was thinking about people like Dick Gregory,
Mm.
or even like Whoopi Goldberg, and thinking about like their work and the way, especially like Dick Gregory talks about Blackness, but even how Whoopi Goldberg is like in some ways like a different type of Blackness.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. And I love that you all thought outside of the box, like, okay, who else could be considered a theorist too?
So the second tenet that we have for the Black Gaze framework is elevating our stories in Black multifaceted experiences. And what that means for us is a lot of times when Black people are trying to share their stories, it's always like a doubt or a silencing, or they're not able to tell their full story within whatever space they're in. And so we lean on the work of Justin Coles with Black Story Work. And we also lean on one of the tenets of CRT with counter storytelling. And so with that, I'm very much so moved by the work of Goldie Muhammad when she talks about how Black people do not merely just exist in this country, we strive to exert our presence. And so being able to sit here and tell our story brings our presence to the forefront. And so you might be thinking, what does this look like in teacher education? Like, how do I do this in my classrooms? As a Black woman, I have learned, and it has taken me almost 5 to 6 years to get to this space, that when I enter into these spaces, I take up space. I tell my story. I feel free within my being that I belong here and that I should be able to speak whatever it is that I need to say needs to be heard. And so I also encourage my Black students, when you are in your classroom spaces, you also take up space because you're paying the same tuition, if not more, and you deserve to have that. And so I also invite other people to come into these spaces and be able to tell their story. And I know we talked about OGs, but there's also some emerging OGs, some people who might not be, you know, your top scholars right now, but they're coming up. And I invite them into our space to make sure that they're telling their story as well.
Good job, Queen. That's excellent.
All right now.
Okay, so the next element that we invite, and I'm glad that you brought up the barbershop, because it's integral in our community, but we have, our next element is called preaching points and action steps for Black folks. And I think when we talk about Blackness and centering Blackness, especially in the education space, we get stuck into the gloom and gloom, like, oh, what are we gonna do? They're gaps, they're this. But the one thing that we love about the Black Gates framework is we like, nah, these are the next steps. Not this as the toolkit of what you can do, but these are the next steps that we can do to make sure that we're centering Blackness and the joy and the excellence and the beauty of Blackness. And so we had to invite Black preaching into the space. If you have never been to a Black church, you are missing out in your life, all right? Especially a Pentecostal one or a Baptist
Now they
one.
staying there all day now.
Shame, okay? Why you gotta put our business out there? Okay, but the one thing that we do in our podcast and also in this framework is we invite those elements of Black preaching into the space. So as you all can see, we're not code switching. You getting all of this Black language and all of the beauty and all of the excellence. And that's part of showing up as your full self. And if you've ever seen a Black preacher preach, they are good at using Black language, right? It is a rhetorical experience that you have to like really understand. And if you're not Black, sometimes some of the things will go over your head. But we infuse that Black language. We infuse that Black culture. If you go to the Baptist church, there's always 3 points, right? At the end of the sermon, correct? And if you get a good Black pastor, they might give you 4, right? And so we always have 1 to 3 points of things that you can do like now to really start centering Blackness, but we add in that culture, that swag, that language as one of the elements. Oh gosh. All right, the next one. This is the most ratchet one. That's why we put ratchet. It's called What You Doing With Your Life, Black Thought, Past and Present. And so this element also used to be called What You Do and Don't. And we changed it because we were like, we're still centering whiteness. Like, why are we only thinking about the written word, right? And we were talking about, okay, I'm gonna go off the tangent. Me and her, we have a group chat for every show we watch. And we was watching P-Valley. Y'all watching P-Valley? Okay. So on P-Valley, this season was crazy. Oh, P-Valley is about strippers. You should, I know. I'm gonna come back. So on P-Valley, it's all of these amazing strippers. But this season, they really went into their personal lives. And we had a chance to see every element of them. So her and I always think about Teacher A and like, you know, we got some people like that in P-Valley in our classes, right? Yeah.
This is our conversation.
This is our conversation. And we were like, because they're so multifaceted. Yes, they were strippers, but they needed to make money. And I mean, look at the country we live in. People need to make money. But they were so deep and so excellent. But if we only see them as strippers, we can't see the whole person. And so what you're doing with your life gives you the opportunity to lean into what are you reading, what are you watching, what are you experiencing that you can bring into the classroom space. And so her and I been going back and forth about how we can teach on P-Valley. That's a story for another day, but we literally keep our eyes open to all of the elements of Blackness and how we can invite that into the classroom space.
And we are writing a piece called For the Strippers and the Scholars. And we said strippers.
No, we are not. No.
Yes, we are.
All right.
So the last invite, we are, it's gonna be dope. We'll send it to y'all.
No, we are not.
We really are. But the final tenet, and it's not in order to make it like the least important tenet, but the final tenet on our podcast, if you listen, we do this segment called I See You. And so what this is I see you, I acknowledge you, and I want to elevate you within the field. When we were talking about honoring the OGs, many of us went to Dick Gregory and Oprah and people like that, right? So like big time people, but there's people who are right here on our level that are doing great work. It might be the person that Justice at the barbershop. It might be somebody else. And so what we do in this part of our framework is we highlight those who are doing the work that we're talking about that are Black, and those that also are important in education. And so we want to say, like, we see you shining, we see you doing your thing, and we list out in our classes, like we ask our students, who is it that you see that's doing this work that we need to put into our classroom spaces? Who is it that's doing this work that could be a good mentor for you? Who is it that you can model after or build on whatever it is that they have going on? And so we make it very applicable to what we are doing within our educational spaces.
And I do want to insert Issa Rae really quick. Issa Rae, I don't know if you all ever seen the interview. She talks about how she built her company and how she built her show. And they were like, well, did you try to get like really great actors? She was like, no, I looked at my friends. I looked at the people in my community. Who can I put on right now? And I think, especially as scholars, we're always trying to say, oh, how can I get in touch with that mentor? I want that person to mentor me because I heard they're great. But you can look right next to you and see who are the people who are doing great work now, because one day they're going to become the Glorious. They're going to become the Goldies, right? And so how do we include them in our classroom spaces right now so that they're not waiting until, well, I don't know how old them people are, but they're not waiting until they're a certain age to be seen as a theorist or a great writer or a great researcher. All right, friend. I'm doing it the wrong thing.
And so last but not least, we want to do a place where we went back to the swag. We want to put some swag on it. Who are some of the Black folks that are coming up in education that should be centered in how we teach and conceptualize teacher education? So I want you to just take a moment, think about some Black folks you know that's doing this work right now that might not be a big name. And I want you to just think about that, make a list or something. I got one, I'm gonna say Brittany Marshall. If y'all don't know about Brittany and Brittany's work, thinking about it, like one time me and Brittany was leaving Kisha house from a cookout, and well, I'm telling all our business, I know, whatever, people go to cookouts. But anyway, we were leaving, we were having a conversation just about her math focus in Black girls. Do you know how amazing that is for me to know a Black mathematician? And for me to be able to introduce my daughters to a Black mathematician. And so for her, I feel like that's the person that I see you, and I'm going to continue to see you because I do believe that she has something that is going to really impact the field. And so I want to open up the floor. Who is somebody that y'all see this so we can be looking out for them and ask them, can you help us out? Anybody?
Kevin.
What is he doing, Kevin? He was
Kevin, tell us about your research and how we could be using it in teacher ed. Come on. See what we do?
But see, that's another thing that we do is we shy away. You taking up space, that's part of the framework. What's your research?
How can we use it? Not use you, I said use it in our work.
I am writing a piece for action in teacher education.
Yes.
I'm centering Blackness.
It's
okay. I mean, I'm really having a conversation about how we have conceived of social justice teacher education, absent a real focus on teacher power building and teacher unionism, and the importance of understanding you're entering a profession that's highly politicized. Oftentimes we have young people who are in their 20s, who for many of them, this is their first, big person job. Yep. And they are coming into an environment where they can expect to be overworked, expect to be underpaid, and expect to be oftentimes, especially if you're in an urban school, be disempowered, right? As a laborer. And so the piece is really pushing us to rethink about social justice teacher education outside of this pedagogy and practice, but to sort of embrace the reality that teachers, pre-service teachers need to understand how to build power, because the sort of labor environment that they're going to be entering is highly contested. And I look at the Chicago Teachers Union as an example. The Black-led teachers union, historically Black, extremely powerful. They won tons of labor fights, and also making the case that teacher labor struggle is not separate from the kind of solidarity and movement building that's happening to really enrich classrooms and make sure that Black students and Black parents and families actually have the kind of schools that they want. Schools that are both like led and run by folks from the community, people who have an interest in the community, but, yeah, so, that's what I'm.
Listen.
That's amazing. That is so dope. And when you finish it, let us know so we can cite you.
Yes. Okay, so I wanna, friend, I don't think we have enough time. We have like 10 minutes, so.
You just talk about
Okay.
everything.
All right, so it says, people always ask us when we do presentations on censoring Blackness, they're like, why censor Blackness? And I always ask, why not? Because we censor whiteness and everything. And I just want to give you all just two of the most latest examples. The first one, Holly just became the star of The Little Mermaid, a Black girl with brownish reddish locks. And can you imagine what that's gonna feel like for a Black girl? But here you have a Facebook group, Christians Against the Little Mermaid, right? Where they're actually writing an entire document and having people sign it to protest the new Little Mermaid. They're actually planning to have a protest before the movie comes out. The second thing, if you had a chance to see Quinta Brunson win her award a couple of days ago, this is how she won her award, with Jimmy Kimmel lying on the floor. And such an important moment, he didn't think, damn, maybe I should get up and allow this Black woman to have her moment. And even though a lot of people in the country laughed and thought it was cool, in that moment, he still decided to censor whiteness and censor himself. But why not censor Blackness? Goli Muhammad always says that in order for us to get it right with anybody, we got to get it right with Black people first. And when we get it right with Black people, we'll get it right with everybody else.
And I always tell my pre-service teachers, if you learn how to teach Black children correctly, you won't be able to teach everybody correctly, because it's always the Black child that comes in the classroom that we hold all of this anti-Blackness towards. And so I just wanted to share that, because once we do right by our Black students, we're doing right by all students. We are short on time, so I want to just read this question for it to sit with y'all. Based on the tenets that we shared, and there were 5 of them, what can you do in your courses or suggest in classroom practices to center Blackness immediately? Sometimes we are like, oh, I gotta go home and I gotta sit on it, I gotta think about it. No. If you're teaching today, what you gonna do differently today? Like, it's not, if we were trying to change it for something that had a stipend attached, you would be able to figure it out. So how are we able to go into our spaces and say, you know what, this is something that I need to change this semester? I'm always moved by the words of my former pastor, Reverend Frank Elmer Swain, and he would always say, there ain't nobody coming to save us. And that's why this work is so important to Dr. P and I, because there's nobody coming to save us when it comes to Blackness and when it comes to focusing on it in educational context. And so we have to be able to immediately go in to action mode. And that's what the Black Gaze Framework is about.
So we're gonna leave y'all with Shirley Ralph. She did an amazing speech when she won her Emmy. And Shamaine and I were actually talking about how emotional we got when we saw it. And we thought it would be a great way to end this presentation. That's later. Oh, the devil be pissed.
Down. Just go to your shared and there we go.
Yeah. I can make it bigger here. Sure.
It played first, didn't it?
It did. Quick download.
Where is it? Right here.
Can't go the phone. Oh man, it was pretty amazing.
Dang, we wanted y'all to be part of this.
It came back up.
Can you Google it?
Yeah.
No, because hold on.
Oh, yes, you can. It's on YouTube.
It's not.
It is.
Oh, it's okay.
It's not the one you want?
No,
Hold on, because I did look at it on YouTube.
it's all these people talking about it, but it ain't it. But you can try.
Let's see.
Yeah, they gonna be talking. Let's see if that one.
No fees or minimums and no overdraft fees are another reason banking with Capital One is an even easier decision than this.
Stop.
Oh, and
You're in.
let's go to the whole count.
Yep, even easier than that. What's in your wallet?
You didn't say.
am an endangered species, but I sing no victim song. I am a woman, I am an artist, and I know where my voice belongs.
That's it. So we just wanted to leave you with that moved us. That also kind of helped us to make sense of the work that we do. We are an endangered species, but we know where our voice belongs, and it belongs within these spaces. So we thank you for your time. We thank you for listening to us. And like we do on our podcast, we out. Questions, comments, concerns?
No concerns. We can't do anything with it. Now, what's up, y'all?
What's coming up next season?
We're about to do an emerging OGs, live events. We'll be doing some live stuff at NCTE. Can't tell y'all everything. So we want to take the time, the fall, both of us are actually preparing our materials for tenure now. And so it's a little overwhelming. So we're
Glad when we get it.
glad when we get it. But we are going to be interviewing some up and coming scholars and talking about their work. There'll be live events. We have a great balance of people all over that we'll be interviewing, but we have a chance to interview like an OG, possibly at NCTE. So that's what we'll be doing this fall.
And the other thing is we actually want this is a forthcoming, the actual framework, but we actually want to make sure that gets published so we can start breaking that down and pushing that out.
So about that framework, in the meantime, is there anything currently that we can cite or refer to as far as using that in our own work?
Yep. So we always ask people to cite our podcast too. You can cite whichever one. But we have it under review currently. So we are praying that it'll be out soon. But to be completely transparent,
I was about to say, tell the truth and shame the
people don't know
devil.
what to do with our work.
That's
They're
what we've
like,
gotten.
"It's super black." And they're like, this is not white enough. Like, we don't know what.
They didn't say it's not white enough, but that's what they mean.
That's what they mean when they say, when they were like, this is really great work, but we don't know what to do with it. It
Yeah, we
doesn't
did get
fit
that.
into our thing. And so,
It's
that's
at
been
its
a challenge
third
for us.
journal.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question.
What's up?
More ontological than anything. So when you are considering what it means to center Blackness, where do people like, and as you mentioned several people who I hold in high esteem as well, but I also think about like, I imagine like people like Condoleezza Rice, Clarence Thomas,
Yeah.
they're also Black folks too. What do we do with them? How do they work? What they represent in the kind of Blackness that they represent figure into your understanding of centering Blackness? Are we saying center them as well, or?
Man,
Everybody gotta go.
Everybody gotta go. So to be honest,
Yeah.
I think Condoleezza Rice, Clarence Thomas, not to the extent of where they are, but especially Black professionals, a little bit of that lives in all of us. And I think that we have to be intentional about interrogating that, right? Especially when we arrive. And I think there are people who are grifters who take advantage of this space, right? They can make money off of it. They can publish books. They can do a lot of different things. But I think it's a consistent checking. Now, for me, Condoleezza Rice, and they can't come to the cookout. Not right now. But they're still a part of our community. And those are conversations that we have to continue to have about
Privately.
and why it's so complex, right? Because I think about, I don't want to give it all away, but I'm actually getting ready to do a TED Talk on just that and how I had to undo some stuff. And like, but where did that start? Who implanted that inside of me to say that this is the way that I need to show up in the world and that's the right way? And so I'm on this journey to say, like, I no longer want to show up that way. This is how I can show up in all of my Blackness and all of my excellence, but it took me a lot of hurt and pain to get there. And I believe Toni Morrison when she says that every single Black person will have that moment when you know you are Black, because this country will do it to you, right? But what do you do with that? There are some of us that lean more into whiteness when we have that moment. And then there are people who go through like, hold on, I'm never going to be accepted here. I'm never going to be welcomed here. And I'm no longer welcomed in my community either because I've separated myself so much from them. Now what do I do? And so I think we have to have those critical conversations with each other, but we all got to go. We can't leave anybody behind, but it's going to take some coming to Jesus moments where we sit down with each other and say, you can't show up like that.
And I'm also thinking of Fannie Lou Hamer, like none of us are free until all of us are free. And so just because Condoleezza thinks she's free, if I ain't free, she ain't free. So like we kind of also got to move into that space that we got to take everybody. And that goes back to our conversation about P Valley. We got to take the strippers, we got to take the scholars, we got to take the baby mamas, like we have to take everyone into that space. And we also have to understand that anti-Blackness runs through Black bodies.
Everybody, it's like small. We all breathe it in. None of us are exempt from it.
But and it takes everyday checking.
Every day.
Like you have to check yourself. There's ways that I show up in academia that I'm like, girl, that is wrong. So we also have to be honest with ourselves.
But yeah, they not invited to my cookout. That was a great question.
Any other questions or comments? Because we know y'all got to get out of here.
I got one.
But before you get, yeah, go ahead and then don't leave yet.
Okay. Go ahead, Matt.
I feel like-
Where you going, man?
Sorry, I got one crack.
Okay.
This is awesome. What you just talked about is what my dissertation was about. I focused on Black men who joined white fraternities and white schools and all their perspectives on how they ended up on the doorstep of a place that doesn't represent them and how the Black community and the white community looked at them as an individual in that space. It's a fascinating discussion, but it's exactly what you're talking about, this middleness about don't quite fit here, don't quite fit here. But if I'm held to being Black, what does that mean versus being held to being in this white space? It's a fascinating discussion.
Man, I need to read that. Thank you.
Thank
Matt.
you.
Thanks for coming through.
So I just wanted to first of all, thank you so much for coming and being here physically with us for the first brown bag of the season. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And second, before everyone leaves, speaking of emerging OGs, we have Tia Matkins coming
Yay.
next week,
He is
talking
dope.
about, I'm not exactly sure what necessarily she'll focus on, but she has a recent article with Christina Restrepo-Nazar, theoretical perspectives for developing anti-racist teaching dispositions and practices in pre-service teachers education. So it's going to be another excellent talk. So please come next Wednesday.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank y'all.
Thank you.